Hey guys, welcome back. Today's concept is insane. What if Akeno saved Issei from Raynare instead of him dying and becoming a devil? This is absolutely broken because Akeno's already overpowered with holy lightning, but imagine if Issei's boosted gear evolved to enhance her instead of himself. We're talking about amplifying her fallen angel heritage to create holy attacks that can permanently damage any supernatural being, something no pure devil could ever do. So we took this concept and created an epic story where Issei stays human, partners with Akeno, and together they rewrite supernatural politics through pure teamwork, going from fighting fallen angels all the way to founding an organization that proves cooperation beats conquest. Smash that like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Let's dive in. The autumn evening air carried a chill that made Issei Hayaudu pull his jacket tighter as he walked through Kyo Park. His mind was still reeling from what had just happened with Raynare. The girl he'd thought was his first girlfriend had just revealed herself as some kind of winged creature and declared her intention to kill him. This has to be a nightmare, he thought desperately. People don't just sprout black wings and start talking about sacred gears and, "I'm sorry, Issei," came Raynare's voice from above. He looked up to see her hovering in the air, her fallen angel wings spread wide, a spear of golden light forming in her hand. "But you've served your purpose. Die for me, won't you?" Terror froze Issei's legs as the spear of light descended toward him. He couldn't move, couldn't think, could only watch as death approached in the form of his first love's betrayal. Then the world exploded in purple lightning. Crack! Thunder rolled across the park as a massive bolt of electricity slammed into Raynare from the side, sending her careening into a nearby tree with a scream of pain and surprise. The golden spear dissipated as she hit the trunk hard enough to shake leaves loose. "A fallen angel attacking a human in my territory," came a melodious voice that somehow managed to sound both beautiful and terrifying. "How bold!" Issei spun around to see a girl about his age walking calmly into the clearing. She had long black hair that seemed to shimmer with residual electricity, and her violet eyes held an otherworldly intensity that made his breath catch. Most shocking of all, she wore what looked like a school uniform, his school uniform, the Q Academy girl's outfit. "You," Raynare struggled to her feet, one wing hanging at an odd angle. "You're one of them." "A devil," the mysterious girl devil smiled, but there was nothing warm about it. "Akeno Heimjima, queen of the Gremory family, and you are trespassing." Purple electricity began to dance around Akeno's fingertips as she raised her hand. "I suggest you leave, now." Raynare's eyes darted between Akeno and Issei, calculation flickering across her features despite her obvious pain. "This isn't over, boy," she hissed at Issei. "Sacred gear wielders can't hide forever, especially not under the protection of devils." With that, she launched herself into the air with her one good wing, disappearing into the night sky with awkward, pained flight. For several moments, the park was silent except for the sound of Issei's labored breathing. Then Akeno turned to him, and her expression immediately softened from the cold fury she'd shown the fallen angel. "Are you hurt?" she asked, approaching him with graceful steps. Issei tried to speak but only managed a strangled sound. Everything he thought he knew about the world had just been shattered in the span of 5 minutes. Wings. "Lightning," he stammered, pointing vaguely in the direction Raynare had fled. "Breathe," Akeno said gently, placing a warm hand on his shoulder. The touch seemed to ground him somehow, the residual electricity in her fingers creating an oddly comforting, tingling sensation. "I know this is overwhelming, but you're safe now." "Safe?" Issei's voice cracked. "A girl I was dating just tried to kill me with a spear made of light, and you just threw lightning at her like you were in some kind of anime." "What the hell is going on?" Akeno studied his face carefully as if weighing her options. Finally, she seemed to come to a decision. "You said she mentioned sacred gears," she said. "Do you know what that means?" "No. I don't know what any of this means." Issei ran his hands through his hair frantically. "Yesterday, my biggest problem was whether Matsuda and Madohama would find out I actually got a girlfriend. Now apparently I'm living in some kind of supernatural horror movie." "Not horror," Akeno corrected with a small smile. "More like urban fantasy, perhaps." Despite everything, Issei found himself almost wanting to smile back. "Almost? This is real, isn't it?" he asked quietly. All of it, wings, lightning, whatever sacred gears are, very real, Akeno confirmed. And I'm afraid that fallen angel won't give up easily. She specifically targeted you for a reason, and that reason isn't going away just because I interrupted her tonight. The weight of that statement settled over Issei like a lead blanket. So what am I supposed to do? I can't fight something like that. I'm just a normal high school student who wants to, he trailed off, realizing how ridiculous his usual goals sounded in light of recent events. Come with me, Akeno said decisively. There are people you need to meet, things you need to understand, and most importantly, you need protection until we can figure out exactly what that fallen angel wants with you. Protection from who? More people like you? Devils, yes, but we're not what you think we are. Akeno began walking toward the park's exit, gesturing for him to follow. At least most of us aren't. Issei hesitated for a moment, looking back at the tree where Raynare had crashed. Scorch marks from Akeno's lightning were still visible on the bark. Do I have a choice? He asked. You always have a choice, Akeno replied, pausing to look back at him, but some choices are better than others. Right now, your alternatives are coming with me to learn the truth, or going home and hoping that fallen angel doesn't decide to finish what she started while you're sleeping. When she put it like that, lead the way, Issei said, jogging to catch up with her. But I want answers, real answers, not cryptic supernatural nonsense. Fair enough, Akeno agreed as they walked through the park's gates. Though I should warn you, the truth is often stranger than the cryptic nonsense. As they made their way back toward Q Academy, Issei couldn't help but steal glances at his mysterious savior. There was something about her that seemed familiar, though he was sure he'd never seen her before. Maybe it was just the school uniform. Hey, he said suddenly, you go to Q Academy, right? How come I've never seen you before? Akeno's smile turned slightly mischievous. Oh, you have seen me, you just weren't paying attention. Most boys at our school are too busy staring at the other famous beauties to notice the vice president of the Occult Research Club. Occult Research Club, Issei repeated. That's a real club, very real, and as of tonight, you're going to become very familiar with it. They walked in companionable silence for a few minutes before Issei worked up the courage to ask the question that had been nagging at him. Why did you save me? You don't even know me. Akeno was quiet for so long that Issei thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than before. Let's just say I know what it's like to be caught between different worlds, she said. No one should have to face that alone. Something in her tone suggested there was a much deeper story there, but Issei decided not to push. He had enough revelations to process for one night. As Q Academy came into view, its windows dark except for a single light in what looked like an old school building, Issei realized his life had just taken a turn he could never have imagined. Akeno, he said quietly, yes, thank you for saving me, I mean. She smiled at him then, and for the first time since Raynare's betrayal, Issei felt like maybe everything would be okay. Don't thank me yet, Akeno replied. Wait until after you meet my king, she's going to have a lot of questions for you. King, Issei thought as they approached the school building. Just how deep does this rabbit hole go, he was about to find out. The old school building felt different at night. As Akeno led Issei through the dimly lit corridors, their footsteps echoed off the wooden floors in a way that seemed almost supernatural. The building itself looked like something from a different era, all dark wood paneling and tall windows that cast long shadows in the moonlight. This place gives me the creeps, Issei muttered, staying close to Akeno as they climbed a narrow staircase. Most humans find it unsettling, Akeno replied with a knowing smile. That's rather the point, it keeps casual visitors away from our activities. They stopped in front of an ornate wooden door marked with a brass plaque reading Occult Research Club. Akeno paused with her hand on the doorknob. Before we go in, she said, her expression becoming more serious, there are a few things you should understand. What you're about to see will change everything you thought you knew about the world. There's no going back to ignorance after this. After tonight, I'm not sure I want to go back, Issei replied, surprised by his own honesty. Besides, that fallen angel Raynare, she's not going to just forget about me, is she? No, Akeno confirmed grimly. She won't, which is why you need protection, and more importantly, you need to understand what you're dealing with. She opened the door and warm light spilled out into the hallway. The room beyond looked like a comfortable study. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with volumes that seemed far older than anything that should be in a high school club room. A large desk dominated one end of the space, while comfortable chairs and a sofa were arranged around a coffee table in the center. But what caught Issei's attention immediately were the people waiting inside. A tall, strikingly beautiful girl with long crimson hair sat behind the desk, her blue eyes studying him with keen intelligence. Even sitting down, she radiated an aura of authority that made it clear she was in charge. To her left stood a blonde-haired boy who looked like he'd stepped out of a fashion magazine, his expression politely curious. On the sofa sat a petite girl with short white hair and golden eyes, who regarded Issei with the kind of blank stare that somehow managed to be both intimidating and adorable. "Everyone," Akeno announced as they entered, "this is Issei Hayaudu. Issei, allow me to introduce the Occult Research Club." The crimson-haired girl rose from her seat with fluid grace. "Issei Hayaudu," she said, her voice carrying a melodious quality that seemed almost hypnotic. "I am Ria's Gremory, president of this club. Akeno has told me what happened tonight." You already know?" Issei stammered, still trying to process the regal bearing of this girl who couldn't be more than a year older than him. "Akeno contacted me immediately after your encounter with the fallen angel," Rias explained, moving around the desk to approach him. "The question now is what we're going to do about it." The blonde boy stepped forward with a friendly smile. "Yuyudo Kiba," he introduced himself with a slight bow. "I have to say it's unusual for someone to survive an encounter with a fallen angel without supernatural protection." "That's because Akeno saved me," Issei said, glancing gratefully at his rescuer. "If she hadn't shown up when she did, you would have died," the white-haired girl stated matter-of-factly. Her voice was soft but carried an odd weight to it. "I am Kaneko Taoju, you smell human." "Thank you," Issei replied uncertainly. "I think..." Rias moved to stand directly in front of him, studying his face with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "The fallen angel mentioned sacred gears. Do you know what that means?" "No," Issei admitted. "Until tonight, the weirdest thing in my life was when Matsuda tried to convince me that the school nurse was actually an alien." Despite the serious atmosphere, Kiba chuckled at that. "A simpler time, I'm sure." "Sacred gears," Rias began, settling into what was clearly a lecturing tone, "are supernatural artifacts created by God and embedded within certain humans. They grant their wielders various abilities, from the mundane to the catastrophically powerful. And you think I have one of these sacred gears?" Issei asked. "The fallen angel seemed to think so," Akeno interjected. "They don't typically target random humans. If Raynare was after you specifically, there's a reason." Rias nodded in agreement. "Which brings us to our current dilemma. You've been exposed to our world, you're apparently a sacred gear wielder, and you have a fallen angel who wants you dead. Under normal circumstances, the solution would be simple. Which is, I would offer to reincarnate you as a devil," Rias said directly. "You would become part of my peerage, gain supernatural abilities, and be under my protection. The fallen angel would think twice about attacking a devil, especially one under the protection of the Gremory family." The casual way she said it made Issei's head spin. "Reincarnate me. As in, kill me and bring me back as something else." "The process isn't quite that dramatic," Kiba assured him. "More like a transformation. You would retain your memories and personality but gain new abilities and a longer lifespan. However," Rias continued, her expression becoming more thoughtful, "Akeno has requested that we explore alternative arrangements." All eyes turned to Akeno, who stepped closer to Issei. "I believe Issei should have a choice in this matter. He's already survived an encounter with a fallen angel as a human. Perhaps there are other ways to ensure his protection while allowing him to remain what he is." "That's surprisingly humanitarian of you, Akeno," Kaneko observed, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced it was a good idea. "What would that mean exactly?" Issei asked. "Staying human, I mean." Rias exchanged a glance with Akeno before answering. "It would mean you couldn't become an official member of my peerage, but you could potentially serve as an ally. We would provide protection and training, and in return you would assist us when needed." "And the fallen angel would still want you dead," Kiba said bluntly. That part doesn't change regardless of what you choose. But, Akeno added, moving to stand beside Issei, you would have our support in dealing with her. And if you do possess a sacred gear, you could potentially learn to use it for your own defense. Ria studied the two of them with an expression that Issei couldn't quite read. This is highly irregular. I've never had a human ally before. Maybe it's time to try something new, Akeno suggested, though there was something in her tone that suggested this meant more to her than she was letting on. Kaneko tilted her head slightly. The pervert smells determined and scared but determined. I'm standing right here, Issei protested weakly. She's not wrong though, Kiba said with a grin. You're handling this remarkably well for someone whose worldview just got completely shattered. Issei looked around the room at these people who seemed to be offering him something he'd never imagined, a chance to be part of something bigger than himself, while still remaining fundamentally human. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. If I stay human, he said slowly, what kind of training are we talking about? Basic supernatural awareness, Riaz replied. Understanding the different factions and how they operate, self-defense techniques, and if you do have a sacred gear, learning to access and control it. I could personally oversee much of your training, Akeno offered. Since I was the one who brought you into this situation, I feel responsible for your safety. There was something in the way she said it that made Issei look at her more closely. In the warm light of the club room, he could see the genuine concern in her violet eyes, but also something else, something that looked almost like loneliness. Why? He asked her directly. Why is it so important to you that I have a choice? Akeno was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling with how to answer. Finally, she spoke. Because I know what it's like to be caught between two worlds, never fully belonging to either. If there's a way for you to find your place without giving up who you are, I think that's worth exploring. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the weight of her words. Riaz was looking at her queen with obvious surprise, as if she'd revealed something unexpected. All right, Issei said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. I want to try. I want to stay human, learn to protect myself, and help however I can. Even knowing the risks, Kiba asked seriously. Even knowing that you might not survive the next encounter with that fallen angel, Kaneko added, her blunt delivery somehow making the question more impactful. Issei thought about Raynare's betrayal, about the casual way she'd been prepared to kill him. Then he looked at Akeno, who had risked herself to save a complete stranger. Yeah, he said firmly, even knowing the risks. Besides, he added with a grin that felt more confident than he actually felt, how hard can it be? The collective expression on everyone's faces told him it was going to be very hard indeed. Very well, Riaz said formally, moving back behind her desk. Issei Hyoudu, I hereby accept you as an allied member of the Occult Research Club. Akeno will be your primary instructor and guardian. Try not to get killed. I'll do my best, Issei replied. Good, Akeno said with a smile that seemed genuinely pleased. We'll start tomorrow. For tonight, I'll escort you home and establish some basic protective wards around your house. As they prepared to leave, Kiba clapped Issei on the shoulder. Welcome to the supernatural world, Issei. Try to keep an open mind. Things are about to get very interesting. Walking back through the dark hallways with Akeno beside him, Issei reflected on how completely his life had changed in the span of a few hours. This morning, his biggest concern had been whether he'd have the courage to hold Yuuma's hand. Now he was apparently some kind of supernatural ally learning to fight fallen angels. Akeno, he said as they reached the school's entrance. Yes, thank you for everything, for saving me, for giving me a choice, for caring what happened to me. She smiled at him, and in that moment, Issei felt like maybe being thrust into this dangerous new world might not be the worst thing that had ever happened to him. Come on, Akeno said, stepping out into the night air. Let's get you home safely. Tomorrow, your real education begins. As they walked away from Q Academy, neither of them noticed the figure watching from the shadows, a figure with black wings who was very interested in the human boy who had somehow avoided his fate. The next morning came far too early for Issei's liking. He'd barely slept, his mind racing with everything that had happened, fallen angels, devils, sacred gears, and the violet-eyed girl who had saved his life. When his alarm went off at 6:30 a.m., he seriously considered calling in sick to school. Then he remembered that Akeno would be expecting him. Akeno Heimjima, he thought as he dragged himself out of bed. How did I never notice her before? The morning routine felt surreal. Brushing his teeth, getting dressed, eating breakfast with his parents who had no idea their son had nearly died the night before, it all seemed so mundane compared to lightning bolts and supernatural politics. "You look tired, dear," his mother commented as she set his breakfast on the table. "Late night studying?" "Something like that," Issei mumbled, pushing his eggs around his plate. He couldn't exactly explain that he'd spent the evening learning about devil hierarchies and protective wards. The walk to school was nerve-wracking. Every shadow seemed threatening, every person he passed potentially dangerous. Akeno had assured him that the protective wards around his house would keep him safe at night, but daylight offered no such guarantees. He was so focused on watching for threats that he almost missed the familiar figure waiting by the school gates. "Good morning, Issei," Akeno called out cheerfully, as if meeting him before school was the most natural thing in the world. Relief flooded through him at the sight of her. In the morning sunlight, she looked every bit the normal high school student, long black hair gleaming, school uniform perfectly pressed, a gentle smile on her face. If he hadn't witnessed her throwing lightning the night before, he might have convinced himself it had all been a dream. "Morning," he replied, jogging over to her. "You're here early." "I wanted to make sure you made it to school safely," she said, falling into step beside him as they walked through the gates. "How did you sleep?" "Terribly," Issei admitted. "I kept thinking I heard wings outside my window." Akeno's expression softened with sympathy. "That's normal. The first few days are always the hardest. Your mind is trying to process a completely new reality." As they walked through the school corridors, Issei became acutely aware of how many students were staring at them, or more accurately, staring at her. "Is it just me, or is everyone looking at us?" he whispered. "They're looking at me," Akeno corrected with amusement. "You're walking with one of the great ladies of Q Academy. That's bound to attract attention." "Great ladies?" "Myself and Ria's Butchu. We're, well, popular, you could say." Issei could see why. Even setting aside her supernatural nature, Akeno was stunning. But there was something else, something that drew people's attention beyond mere beauty. An aura of confidence and mystery that made her stand out in any crowd. "Does this happen every day?" he asked as another group of male students stopped their conversation to stare. "Usually. Though having you beside me is certainly adding to the spectacle." She glanced at him with a mischievous smile. "How does it feel to be the subject of jealous glares from half the male student body?" "Terrifying," Issei replied honestly. "Almost as terrifying as fallen angels." Akeno laughed, a musical sound that made several nearby students look their way again. "Don't worry, most of them are harmless." They reached Issei's classroom and Akeno paused at the door. "I'll meet you after school for your first training session. Try to pay attention in class, you'll need all the mental focus you can get." "What kind of training are we talking about?" Issei asked nervously. "Basic supernatural awareness to start, learning to sense different types of energy, recognizing potential threats." Her expression became more serious. "And we need to see if we can awaken your sacred gear properly." The mention of sacred gears made Issei's stomach flip. "What if I don't actually have one? What if that fallen angel was wrong?" "Then we'll figure out another way to keep you safe," Akeno said firmly. "But somehow I don't think she was wrong." Classes passed in a blur of distraction. Issei tried to focus on his lessons, but his mind kept wandering to supernatural topics. During lunch, Matsuda and Madohama peppered him with questions about his date with Yuma, and he had to make up increasingly elaborate lies about why it had ended early. "She had a family emergency," he explained for the third time. "Had to leave suddenly." "That's rough, man," Matsuda said sympathetically. "But hey, at least you got to hold hands with a real girl. If only they knew how that date had really ended." The final bell couldn't come soon enough. As his classmates filed out, Issei gathered his things and headed for the old school building, his heart pounding with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. He found Akeno waiting in the occult research club room, but she'd changed out of her school uniform into something more practical, dark pants, and a fitted top that wouldn't restrict her movement. The casual clothes somehow made her seem more approachable, less like the untouchable beauty he'd been walking with that morning. "Ready for your first lesson?" she asked, gesturing to a clear space in the center of the room where the furniture had been pushed aside. "As ready as I'll ever be," Issei replied, setting down his bag. "Good, we'll start with basic energy awareness." Akeno moved to stand in front of him, close enough that he could smell her subtle perfume. "Close your eyes and try to clear your mind." Issei obediently closed his eyes, though clearing his mind proved more difficult than expected. Having Akeno so close was distracting in ways that had nothing to do with supernatural danger. "Focus," she said softly, as if reading his thoughts. "Feel the energy around you. Every living thing has an aura, a supernatural presence. Devils, angels, fallen angels, we all have distinct signatures." "I don't feel anything," Issei said after a moment. "Try harder, don't think about it, just sense it." Issei concentrated, trying to push aside his nervousness and self-doubt. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then, gradually, he began to notice something, a warm, tingling sensation that seemed to emanate from Akeno herself. "There," he said excitedly, "I can feel something like electricity but gentler." "Very good," Akeno said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "That's my devil aura." "What else can you sense?" Issei expanded his awareness, reaching out with senses he didn't know he possessed. The feeling was strange, like flexing a muscle he'd never used before. There were other presences in the building, cooler, more controlled energies that he somehow knew belonged to Ria's and the others. "I can feel the rest of your club," he said wonderingly. "They're different from you." "Similar but different. Each devil has their own unique signature," Akeno explained. "With practice, you'll be able to identify individuals from their aura alone. This ability will help you detect threats before they can." She cut herself off abruptly, her entire body going tense. "What is it?" Issei asked, opening his eyes. "Fallen angels," Akeno said grimly, purple electricity already beginning to dance around her fingertips. "Multiple signatures, approaching fast." As if her words had been a signal, the windows of the club room exploded inward in a shower of glass and golden light. 3 figures in dark clothing dropped through the openings, their black wings spread wide. Raynare was in the center, flanked by 2 other fallen angels Issei didn't recognize. A blue-haired woman with a cruel smile and a blonde girl who looked barely older than a middle schooler. "Hello again, boy," Raynare said, her golden eyes fixed on Issei with predatory intensity. "I believe we have some unfinished business." "Calawarner Mittelt," Akeno addressed the other 2 fallen angels, her voice cold as winter. "I should have expected Raynare to bring backup." "Hello, Akeno," the blue-haired woman Calawarner replied with mock courtesy. "Still playing protector to stray humans, I see." "He's not just any human," the blonde Mittelt added with a vicious grin. "He's a sacred gear wielder, a potentially powerful one from what we've sensed." "Which is exactly why he must die," Raynare declared, raising her hand as a spear of light began to form. "Before he can become a threat to our kind." "Over my dead body," Akeno snarled, stepping protectively in front of Issei. Lightning erupted from her hands, filling the room with brilliant purple light. But the fallen angels were ready this time. They scattered, using their superior mobility to avoid the worst of the attack. "Issei, get back!" Akeno shouted as Calawarner dive-bombed toward them. But as Issei scrambled away from the battle, something strange happened. Watching Akeno fight 3 opponents at once, seeing her outnumbered and in danger because of him, he felt something awaken deep in his chest, a burning sensation that had nothing to do with fear. "I won't let her get hurt protecting me," he thought fiercely. "I won't be useless." "Boost!" The word erupted from his throat with a power that surprised him. A brilliant red gauntlet materialized on his left arm, pulsing with energy that made the air itself seem to vibrate. Everyone in the room froze, staring at the crimson armor that had appeared. "The boosted gear," Raynare breathed, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and terror. "The Red Dragon Emperor's gauntlet." "Impossible," Mittelt whispered. "He's just a human," but Issei wasn't listening to them. All his attention was focused on Akeno, who was bleeding from a cut on her cheek where one of Calawarner's light spears had grazed her. Without conscious thought, he reached out toward her with his gauntleted hand. "Boost!" the sacred gear announced again, and he felt power flowing from him to her. Akeno gasped as the energy hit her. Her own electrical aura flared to brilliant life, stronger than Issei had ever seen it. The lightning dancing around her hands was no longer purple, it had taken on a golden tinge that made it look almost holy. "What?" she started to say, then understanding dawned in her eyes. "Issei, you're amplifying my power. Boost," the gauntlet announced a third time, and another wave of energy flowed from Issei to Akeno. This time, the change was dramatic. Wings of pure lightning sprouted from Akeno's back, not devil wings, but something else entirely. The holy light that had been mixed with her electrical aura was growing stronger, creating a power unlike anything the fallen angels had ever seen. "Impossible," Calawarner stammered, backing toward the broken window. "No devil can channel holy power." "I'm not just a devil," Akeno said, her voice echoing with newfound strength. She raised her hands and the golden lightning responded, gathering into a massive sphere of energy above her head. "I'm also the daughter of a fallen angel, and right now I'm very, very angry." The attack she unleashed was devastating. Holy lightning filled the room, forcing the three fallen angels to flee through the windows they'd broken. Raynare cast one last venomous look at Issei before disappearing into the sky. "This isn't over, Red Dragon Emperor," her voice echoed back. "We'll be watching for you." As the sound of their retreat faded, Issei felt the power drain out of him all at once. The boosted gear vanished from his arm and he collapsed to his knees, utterly exhausted. "Issei!" Akeno was beside him instantly, her own supernatural aura dimming back to normal levels. "Are you all right?" "Tired," he managed to gasp, "but yeah, I think so." She helped him to his feet, her touch gentle but firm. "That was incredible. I've never felt power like that before." "What exactly happened?" Issei asked, leaning against her for support. "That thing on my arm." The boosted gear, came a deep, rumbling voice that seemed to emanate from the air around them. "One of the 13 Longinus-class sacred gears. I am DxD, the Red Dragon Emperor." Issei nearly jumped out of his skin. "Who said that?" "The Welsh dragon sealed within your sacred gear," the voice continued with what sounded like amusement. "Partner, you have just accomplished something most unusual. Your awakening was triggered not by a desire for personal power but by the need to protect another. This is unprecedented." "Is that bad?" Issei asked nervously. "On the contrary, it may be the most promising beginning I have witnessed in centuries. Your sacred gear has evolved along a path of enhancement and support rather than pure destructive power. Combined with your partner's unique heritage," the dragon's voice trailed off thoughtfully, "this could be very interesting indeed." Akeno was staring at Issei with wonder. "You enhanced my abilities beyond anything I thought possible. That holy lightning, I haven't been able to access that part of my heritage since I was a child." "Your heritage?" Issei asked, though he was beginning to piece things together. "I'm half fallen angel," she admitted quietly. "My father was a fallen angel, my mother was human. I've spent most of my life suppressing that part of myself, but when your power flowed into me." She smiled, and for the first time since he'd met her, it looked completely genuine. "I felt whole." The sound of running footsteps echoed through the building, and moments later Rias burst through the door, followed by Kiba and Kaneko. "What happened here?" Rias demanded, taking in the destroyed club room and the lingering scent of ozone. "Fallen angels," Akeno reported. "3 of them, including the one from last night. They were after Issei." "And?" Rias looked between them expectantly. "His sacred gear awakened," Akeno said, unable to keep the excitement out of her voice. "Rias, it's the boosted gear. He's the Red Dragon Emperor." The revelation sent shockwaves through the group. Kiba whistled low under his breath, while Kaneko's usually impassive expression shifted to something approaching interest. "The boosted gear," Rias repeated slowly. "One of the Longinus. No wonder the fallen angels were so determined to eliminate him." "There's more," Akeno continued. "His awakening pattern is unusual. Instead of focusing on personal enhancement, he amplified my abilities to an incredible degree. I was able to access my fallen angel heritage for the first time in years." Rias studied Issei with new intensity. "Show me," she commanded. I don't know how," Issei admitted. "It just happened when I saw Akeno in danger." The trigger was emotional, DxD's voice rumbled through the room, causing Kiba to jump in surprise. The boy's desire to protect his companion awakened abilities that remain dormant in most sacred gear wielders. His path will be one of partnership rather than dominance. Fascinating, Rias murmured. A boosted gear user whose primary instinct is to enhance others rather than himself. Issei, do you understand what this means? That I'm apparently more of a support player than a main character, Issei ventured. Despite the tension of the situation, Akeno laughed. Something like that, but it also means we make an incredibly effective team. Looking around at the faces surrounding him, Ria's calculating interest, Kiba's friendly curiosity, Kaniko's grudging respect, and Akeno's warm pride, Issei felt something shift inside him. For the first time since this whole supernatural mess had started, he felt like he belonged somewhere. So what happens now? He asked. Now, Rias said with a slight smile, we start your real training. If you're going to survive in our world, you'll need to master that sacred gear properly. And the fallen angels will keep coming, Akeno said matter-of-factly, but next time we'll be ready for them. As the group began discussing training schedules and defensive strategies, Issei caught Akeno's eye. She smiled at him, that same genuine expression she'd worn when her heritage had awakened, and he felt the boosted gear stir faintly in response to the emotion. Maybe being thrust into the supernatural world wasn't the worst thing that could have happened to him after all. Partner, DxD's voice whispered privately in his mind, I believe you have found something worth fighting for. That is the most important lesson any sacred gear wielder can learn. Looking at Akeno, who was already planning their next training session with obvious enthusiasm, Issei couldn't help but agree. 3 weeks had passed since Issei's sacred gear awakened, and his training with Akeno had become the highlight of his days. Every afternoon after school, they would meet in the old club room, now repaired and warded more heavily than before, to work on his abilities and their growing partnership. The progress had been remarkable. Under Akeno's patient guidance, Issei had learned to call forth the boosted gear at will, and more importantly, he'd begun to understand how his enhancement abilities worked. Unlike traditional sacred gear users who focused on amplifying their own power, Issei's strength lay in boosting others, particularly Akeno. Boost! The familiar red gauntlet materialized on his left arm as Akeno took her position across the training area they'd set up. Remember, she called out, electricity dancing around her fingertips, don't just push power at me. Feel for the resonance, the connection between our energies. Issei nodded, closing his eyes and reaching out with the supernatural senses she'd helped him develop. There, that warm, tingling sensation that was uniquely Akeno's aura. He focused on it, feeling for the harmony between their energies that made their combination so effective. Boost, the gauntlet announced again, and this time when the energy flowed from him to her, it felt different, more controlled, more precise. Akeno's eyes widened as the enhancement took hold. Her usual purple lightning shifted to that brilliant golden hue that indicated her fallen angel heritage was awakening. But instead of the wild, uncontrolled power of their first attempt, this was focused, refined. Perfect, she breathed, flexing her fingers as holy lightning danced between them. I can feel every nuance of the energy flow. This is incredible. Well done, partner, DxD's voice rumbled approvingly. You're beginning to understand that true strength comes from unity, not dominance. Their training session was interrupted by the club room door opening. Rias entered, but something was wrong. Her usual composed demeanor was cracked, her face pale and her movements stiff with suppressed emotion. Butchu, Akeno immediately dispelled her lightning, concern replacing the satisfaction of successful training. What's wrong? Family business, Rias said shortly, moving to her desk with jerky movements. Nothing that concerns our human ally. The dismissive tone was so unlike Ria's usual politeness that Issei actually flinched. Akeno's expression darkened dangerously. Rias, she said, her voice carrying a warning edge. Whatever's wrong, we're here to help. That includes Issei. No, it doesn't, Rias snapped, whirling to face them. He's not part of my peerage. He's not bound to me by the devil hierarchy. This is a devil matter and he's human. The words hit Issei like a physical blow. Over the past 3 weeks, he'd begun to feel like he truly belonged with the occult research club. Training with Akeno, learning about the supernatural world, even the occasional friendly banter with Kiba and Kaniko. It had all made him feel like he was part of something important. Ria's Gremory, Akeno's voice had gone completely cold, electricity beginning to crackle around her unconsciously. You will explain yourself. Now. For a moment, the two girls stared at each other, and Issei could feel the tension in the room ratcheting up to dangerous levels. Finally, Ria's shoulders sagged, the fight going out of her. I'm engaged, she said quietly, to Riser Phoenix. The formal announcement came today, and the engagement party is scheduled for next week. The words fell into the room like stones into still water, creating ripples of shock that touched everyone present. Engaged? Issei repeated, his voice coming out smaller than he'd intended. An arranged marriage, Rias continued, sinking into her chair as if the weight of the world had settled on her shoulders. It's been in negotiation for months, but I hoped my family would reconsider. They didn't. Akeno was beside her king in an instant, kneeling next to the chair with uncharacteristic vulnerability. Butchu, there has to be something we can do, some way to fight this. There is, Rias said bitterly, a rating game. If I can defeat Riser in formal combat, the engagement can be dissolved. But, she laughed humorlessly. Riser is a high-class devil with centuries of experience. His peerage is fully developed and battle-tested. I have 3 members, one of whom is still learning to control her power, and a human ally who's been training for 3 weeks. The implication hung heavy in the air. Even with Issei's growing abilities, they were hopelessly outmatched. When is the rating game scheduled? Kiba asked as he and Kaneko entered the room, having apparently heard enough to understand the situation. 10 days from now, Rias replied. Riser was generous enough to allow me that much time to prepare. We can do this, Issei said suddenly, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. I know it seems impossible, but you don't understand. Rias cut him off, her earlier dismissiveness returning. This isn't some training exercise or a skirmish with fallen angels. This is formal supernatural combat between devil peerages. The power levels involved are beyond anything you can imagine. Then help me imagine them, Issei shot back, his own temper beginning to flare. You keep saying I'm not strong enough, not experienced enough, not devil enough to be useful. But I've been training every day for 3 weeks. My sacred gear is one of the 13 Longinus. And in case you forgot, Akeno and I took down 3 fallen angels working together. That was different. How? Issei stood up, the boosted gear manifesting without conscious thought. Because they were just fallen angels and not devils. Because it was a surprise attack instead of formal combat. Or because you're so used to thinking in terms of your peerage hierarchy that you can't see what's right in front of you. The room fell silent. Even DxD seemed to be holding his breath. What's right in front of me? Rias asked dangerously. That Akeno and I work together in ways that your normal devil magic can't match, Issei said, his frustration finally boiling over. When I enhance her abilities, she doesn't just get stronger, she becomes something new. Her fallen angel heritage awakens. She can use holy lightning that no pure devil could ever wield. We're not just another king and pawn combination, we're something different. Akeno was staring at him with wide eyes, but he pressed on. You want to beat Riser Phoenix? Then stop thinking about how to make me fit into your peerage structure and start thinking about how to use what makes us unique. Issei, Akeno said softly, but he wasn't finished. I know I'm human. I know I'm not officially part of your peerage, but I chose to be here. I chose to train, to fight, to risk my life alongside all of you. And if you think I'm going to sit on the sidelines while someone forces you into a marriage you don't want just because I don't have the right supernatural classification, then you don't know me at all. The silence that followed was deafening. Rias stared at him with an expression he couldn't read while the others looked between them uncertainly. Finally, Akeno stood up, moving to stand beside Issei. He's right, she said quietly, about all of it. Our partnership isn't bound by traditional devil hierarchies because it's not purely devil in nature. When Issei enhances my power, I can access abilities that no other devil possesses. She turned to face Rias directly. You've been so focused on what Issei isn't, not a devil, not officially yours, that you've missed what he is. He's the Red Dragon Emperor, and his sacred gear has evolved along a path none of us have seen before. Combined with my unique heritage, we're a weapon Riser has never faced, Kaneko finished unexpectedly, her usual stoic demeanor giving way to something approaching enthusiasm. An unknown variable. The kitten's right, Kiba added with a grin. Riser's strength comes from experience and conventional tactics. He'll be prepared for anything a normal devil peerage might throw at him. But Issei and Akeno-san's partnership, that's completely outside his frame of reference. Riaz looked around at her assembled allies, and for the first time since she'd entered the room, hope flickered in her eyes. "You realize this is still an enormous risk," she said slowly. "If we lose, I marry Riser, there's no second chance." "Then we don't lose," Issei said simply. "We spend the next 10 days training harder than we ever have before. We perfect our teamwork, develop new combinations, and when the time comes, we show Riser Phoenix what happens when a devil-fallen angel hybrid powered by the Red Dragon Emperor decides to fight for her friends." "Beautifully said, partner," DxD rumbled approvingly. "This is why I chose you, not for your raw power but for your heart." Riaz was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing their chances. Finally, she stood up, her usual regal bearing returning. "Very well," she said formally. "Issei Hyodu, while you cannot be officially part of my peerage, I hereby request your aid in the upcoming raiding game against Riser Phoenix. Will you stand with us?" "Always," Issei replied without hesitation. "Then we have work to do," Riaz declared, moving to a cabinet and pulling out several thick books. 10 days to prepare for the fight of our lives." As the group began discussing strategy and training schedules, Akeno caught Issei's arm. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for standing up to her, for standing up for us." "We're partners," Issei replied, feeling the truth of it settle into his bones. "In training, in combat, and apparently in telling off devil kings when they're being unreasonable." Akeno laughed, the sound bright and genuine. "I think I'm falling for you, Issei Hyodu." The words sent a jolt through him that had nothing to do with her electrical abilities. "Akeno, later," she said with a smile that promised that conversation wasn't over. "Right now, we have a phoenix to prepare for." As they rejoined the planning session, Issei felt a familiar stirring in his chest, the same feeling that had awakened his sacred gear in the first place. The desire to protect what mattered to him, to be strong enough to stand beside the people he cared about. 10 days to prepare for the most important battle of his life. 10 days to prove that being human didn't make him weak, it made him something Riser Phoenix had never faced before. "Partner," DxD's voice whispered in his mind, "I believe you're about to make history. The first human to participate in a devil raiding game. This should be entertaining." Looking at Akeno, who was already deep in discussion with Riaz about maximizing their combination attacks, Issei couldn't help but grin. Entertaining was definitely one word for it. The 10 days of preparation passed in a blur of intensive training, strategic planning, and nervous energy. The Occult Research Club had transformed their usual meeting space into something resembling a war room, with tactical diagrams covering the walls and training equipment scattered throughout. Issei had never pushed himself so hard in his life. Every morning before school, every afternoon until late evening, and even during lunch breaks, he and Akeno worked on perfecting their partnership. The progress was remarkable. What had started as raw, uncontrolled bursts of enhanced power had evolved into something approaching artistry. "Boost, boost, boost." The boosted gears announcements echoed through the training space as Issei channeled 3 consecutive enhancement waves into Akeno. She stood in the center of the room, wings of holy lightning spread wide behind her, electricity dancing between her fingers in patterns that seemed to defy physics. Her usual purple devil lightning had been completely replaced by the brilliant gold of her awakened fallen angel heritage, creating attacks that no pure devil could defend against. "Thunder Palace Convergence," Akeno called out, raising her hands toward the ceiling. The attack that followed was devastating. Instead of her usual scattered lightning strikes, dozens of perfectly controlled bolts descended from above, each one guided by her enhanced precision. The training dummies they'd set up were reduced to smoking debris in seconds. "Incredible," Riaz breathed, making notes on her tactical clipboard. "The precision is perfect. No wasted energy, complete battlefield control." "And that's just our basic combination," Issei said, though the effort of channeling 3 consecutive boosts had left him breathing heavily. "Wait until you see what we can do with sustained enhancement." Over the past 10 days, they developed a fighting style unlike anything the supernatural world had seen before. Instead of the traditional devil approach of individual power and flashy displays, their partnership focused on tactical precision and overwhelming force multiplication. Issei would maintain a steady flow of enhancement energy while Akeno unleashed attacks that grew progressively more devastating. "Show them the Seraphim configuration," Kiba suggested, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced by the focused intensity they'd all adopted for training. Akeno nodded, taking her position again. This time, when Issei began channeling power into her, something different happened. Instead of simply enhancing her existing abilities, the continuous flow of energy began to transform her very nature. Her devil wings dissolved, replaced by 6 wings of pure holy light that spread behind her like those of a seraph. Her entire body began to glow with soft golden radiance, and when she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate with divine authority. "I am lightning incarnate," she said, her words carrying power that made the air itself vibrate. "I am the bridge between heaven and hell, the storm that purifies and destroys." The holy aura surrounding her was so intense that even Rias had to step back, her devil nature instinctively recoiling from the sacred energy. "How long can you maintain that form?" Rias asked, her voice filled with awe. "As long as Issei can keep channeling power," Akeno replied, though even as she spoke, Issei could feel the tremendous drain the transformation was placing on both of them. "Maybe 5 minutes at full intensity." "That should be more than enough," Rias said with grim satisfaction. "Riser's regeneration is powerful, but it has limits. If we can hit him with that level of holy power, he won't be getting back up," Kaneko finished bluntly. As Akeno powered down from the transformation, Issei caught her as she swayed slightly from the energy feedback. The intimate contact sent a familiar tingle through both of them, not just physical attraction, but the deeper resonance that made their power sharing so effective. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "Better than all right," she replied, her eyes still glowing faintly with residual power. "When we're connected like that, I feel complete. Like all the conflicted parts of my nature finally make sense." Their moment was interrupted by a formal knock on the club room door. Rias immediately straightened, her expression becoming carefully neutral. "Enter," she called out. The door opened to reveal a tall woman in an elaborate maid outfit, her silver hair pulled back in a perfect bun. Despite her servant's attire, she carried herself with an authority that made it clear she was far more than she appeared. "Graphia Lucifuge," Rias said formally, though there was obvious tension in her voice. "I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow. The schedule has been moved up," Graphia replied in a crisp, professional tone. "Lord Riser has requested that the raiding game take place tonight rather than tomorrow. He wishes to conclude matters quickly." The announcement hit the group like a physical blow. They'd been counting on having one more day to prepare, to fine-tune their strategies and combinations. "Tonight," Akeno said, unconsciously moving closer to Issei. "But we were told." "Lord Riser is within his rights to adjust the schedule," Graphia interrupted smoothly. "The raiding game will begin at midnight. You have 4 hours to prepare." With that formal pronouncement, she turned and left, leaving the club in stunned silence. 4 hours, Kiba said quietly. "That's not much time for final preparations." "It's enough," Rias said firmly, though Issei could see the stress in her eyes. "We've trained as hard as we can, our strategies are solid. And we have our secret weapon." She looked at Issei and Akeno, and for the first time in days, she smiled with genuine confidence. Riser is expecting to face a traditional devil peerage. Instead, he's going to encounter something completely outside his experience. A human sacred gear wielder partnered with a half-fallen angel who can channel holy power. That advantage alone might be enough to turn the tide. "What's the arena setup?" Issei asked, trying to push aside his nervousness. "A replica of Q Academy," Rias replied. "Both teams start at opposite ends, and the goal is to defeat the opposing king or eliminate all their pieces. It's basically supernatural warfare." "Riser's peerage?" Akeno inquired. 15 members, all experienced combatants. "His queen is particularly dangerous, Ubaluna the Bomb Queen. She specializes in explosive magic that can level buildings." Rias consulted her notes. He also has several rooks with enhanced physical abilities, bishops with powerful magic, and knights with superhuman speed. Weaknesses? Arrogance, Rhea said immediately. Riser has never lost a raiding game. He tends to underestimate opponents and show off rather than finishing fights quickly. If we can exploit that, we hit hard and fast before he realizes what he's up against, Issei concluded. Exactly. Our entire strategy depends on the element of surprise and overwhelming initial force. As the group began their final preparations, Issei found himself alone with Akeno in a quiet corner of the room. The magnitude of what they were about to attempt was finally sinking in. "Are you scared?" he asked quietly. "Terrified," she admitted, then smiled at his surprised expression, "but also excited. We've discovered something incredible together, Issei. A type of partnership that shouldn't be possible according to everything we know about supernatural hierarchies. What if we're not strong enough? What if Riser is too experienced, too powerful?" Akeno took his hands in hers, and he felt that familiar resonance spark between them. "Then we'll fail together," she said simply. "But I'd rather fail fighting alongside you than succeed without you." The words sent a warmth through him that had nothing to do with sacred gear power. Over the past weeks, his feelings for Akeno had evolved from gratitude to admiration to something much deeper. She wasn't just his partner in combat, she was becoming the most important person in his life. "Akeno," he began, but she pressed a finger to his lips. "After the raiding game," she said softly. "When this is over and Riaz is free, then we'll talk about what's happening between us. For now, let's focus on the fight." "Right," he agreed, though the promise in her eyes made his heart race faster than any supernatural threat ever had. The hours passed quickly. Final strategy sessions, equipment checks, last-minute tactical adjustments. Before any of them felt ready, Grafia returned to escort them to the raiding game arena. The transportation itself was disorienting. A magic circle that whisked them away from the familiar clubroom to what looked like a perfect replica of Q Academy, complete down to the smallest details. The only difference was the eerie red sky overhead and the complete absence of other people. "The Occult Research Club takes the school building," Grafia announced formally. "Team Riser begins at the sports complex. Standard raiding game rules apply. Begin when ready." As she faded from view, leaving them alone in the replica of their home territory, the magnitude of the situation hit all of them at once. "This is it," Rhea said quietly. "Everything we've worked for comes down to the next hour." "Then let's make it count," Issei replied, the boosted gear manifesting on his arm without conscious thought. Akeno moved to stand beside him, electricity already beginning to dance around her fingers. "Ready, partner?" "Always," he replied, feeling their connection snap into place like a key turning in a lock. In the distance, they could see figures moving near the sports complex, Riser's peerage taking their positions. 15 experienced supernatural combatants against their group of 5. The odds were terrible. The stakes were impossibly high. And yet, as Issei felt the familiar warmth of Akeno's presence beside him and the eager rumble of DxD in his sacred gear, he found himself grinning. "Show them what the Red Dragon Emperor and his Lightning Queen can accomplish, partner," DxD whispered. "Make history." "Count on it," Issei murmured, then raised his voice to address his teammates. "Everyone ready?" The chorus of affirmations that answered him was filled with determination and fierce pride. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. The raiding game was about to begin, and Riser Phoenix was about to discover that some combinations were more than the sum of their parts. Much more, the raiding game against Riser had ended 3 days ago in decisive victory, but the supernatural world was still reeling from what they'd witnessed. The footage of Issei and Akeno's combination, a human sacred gear wielder enhancing a half-fallen angel to channel pure holy lightning, had spread through every major faction within hours. Issei sat in the rebuilt clubroom, absently rotating his shoulder where one of Riser's knights had managed to land a hit during the final moments of battle. Despite their overwhelming success, the fight had pushed both him and Akeno to their absolute limits. The Seraphim configuration had indeed proven devastating against Riser's regeneration, but maintaining it for the full battle had left them both unconscious for nearly 12 hours afterward. "Still sore?" Akeno asked, settling into the chair beside him with 2 cups of tea. The past 3 days had seen their relationship shift into something deeper than partnership, though they were still navigating exactly what that meant. A little, Issei admitted, accepting the tea gratefully. I keep forgetting that enhancing you to that level takes a toll on my body too. We'll need to work on building your stamina, she said, then colored slightly at the unintended double meaning. For combat enhancement, I mean. I knew what you meant, Issei replied with a grin, though he couldn't help but notice how beautiful she looked when she blushed. Their moment was interrupted by Ria's entering the club room, but she wasn't alone. Behind her walked a tall, elegant man with silver hair and violet eyes that seemed to hold ancient knowledge. His mere presence made the air feel heavier, charged with barely contained power. Everyone, Ria's announced formally, I'd like you to meet Azazel, Governor General of the Fallen Angels. The introduction hit the room like a thunderbolt. Kiba's hand immediately moved to where his sacred gear would manifest, while Kaneko shifted into a defensive stance. Issei felt the boosted gear stir to life on his arm, responding to his instinctive alarm. But it was Akeno's reaction that surprised everyone. Instead of fear or hostility, her expression crumpled into something between pain and longing. "Father," she whispered, the word barely audible. The revelation sent shockwaves through the group. Azazel, one of the most powerful beings in existence, leader of the fallen angels, was Akeno's father. "Hello, Akeno," Azazel said gently, his ancient authority softening into something approaching paternal affection. "You've grown strong, stronger than I ever imagined possible." "You left," Akeno said, her voice gaining strength and accusation. "When Mother died, you just disappeared." "I had responsibilities to my people," Azazel replied, though there was obvious regret in his voice. "But I've been watching you, always." "And what you accomplished 3 days ago?" He looked at Issei with newfound interest. "That was remarkable. What exactly are you doing here?" Ria's interrupted, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional reunion happening in her club room. "I'm here about your human ally," Azazel said, his attention focusing on Issei with laser intensity, "and about a threat that could destabilize the balance between all 3 factions." "What threat?" Kiba asked, though he still looked ready to draw his sword at a moment's notice. "Cockabil," Azazel said grimly. "One of my former generals. He's gone rogue, convinced that the current peace between angels, devils, and fallen angels is a mistake. He wants to restart the Great War." "And what does that have to do with Issei?" Akeno asked, unconsciously moving closer to her partner. "Everything," Azazel replied. "Cockabil believes that sacred gear wielders represent the future of supernatural warfare. He's been collecting them, trying to build an army of empowered humans to serve his cause." The implications hit Issei like a physical blow. "He wants me, not just you," Azazel continued. "He wants to study your unique development path, a boosted gear wielder whose abilities focus on enhancement rather than personal power. That's unprecedented. Combined with your partnership with my daughter," he looked between Issei and Akeno with something approaching pride, "you've created something entirely new." "So he's coming here," Ria stated rather than asked. "Within days, most likely." Cockabil isn't subtle, he prefers dramatic gestures. He'll probably attack during school hours to maximize civilian casualties and force a response from all 3 factions. The casual mention of civilian casualties made Issei's blood run cold. "We have to evacuate the school. Get everyone to safety before—" "We can't," Ria's interrupted. "Mass evacuations would expose the supernatural world to humans. That's forbidden by every major treaty. So we're supposed to just let innocent people get caught in the crossfire?" Issei demanded. "We protect them by stopping Cockabil before he can harm anyone," Azazel said simply. "Which is where you come in." He produced a small device that looked like a cross between a smartphone and a magical focus. "This is a power measurement tool, standard equipment for evaluating sacred gear wielders." He pointed it at Issei, and immediately the device began beeping frantically. "Impossible," Azazel muttered, checking the readings. "According to this, your base power level is barely above human normal, but when you're connected to Akeno," he looked up with amazement, "the combined reading is off the charts. Higher than some ultimate class devils." "What does that mean?" Issei asked. It means, Azazel said slowly, that you're not just enhancing her abilities, you're creating a genuine fusion of power sources. Human will, dragon strength, devil magic, and fallen angel heritage, all unified into something greater than the sum of its parts. The boy speaks truth, DxD's voice rumbled through the room. This partnership transcends normal sacred gear limitations. Together, they access power that neither could achieve alone. Cockabil won't be expecting that, Azazel continued. He'll see a human boy with a sacred gear and a half-breed daughter who's never fully embraced her heritage. He won't understand what you've become together until it's too late. You want us to fight him, Akeno said quietly. I want you to survive him, Azazel corrected. Cockabil is ancient, powerful, and completely ruthless. He commands 10 wings, more than any fallen angel except for myself. In direct combat, he could eliminate any of you individually. But together, Issei asked. Together, you might have a chance. Your holy lightning attacks are one of the few things that can permanently damage a fallen angel of his power level. Akeno was staring at her father with a mixture of emotions Issei couldn't fully decipher. Why should we trust you? You abandoned me once. How do we know this isn't some elaborate trap? Azazel's composed expression cracked slightly, showing genuine pain. Because despite everything I've done wrong as a father, I love you, Akeno. And I've seen what this boy brings out in you, the peace you found with your dual heritage. I won't let Cockabil destroy that. The emotional weight of the conversation was interrupted by a massive explosion that shook the entire school building. Through the clubroom windows, they could see pillars of dark light erupting from the direction of the sports complex. He's early, Azazel said grimly, moving toward the window. And he's not alone. In the distance, Issei could see figures with black wings descending from the sky, at least a dozen fallen angels with more appearing every moment. At their head flew a figure that radiated malevolent power, his 10 wings spread wide like a dark angel of death. Cockabil, Ria's breathed. Students are still in the building, Kiba reported, checking his phone. Classes don't end for another hour. Barrier team now, Ria's ordered. Kaneko, help me establish protective wards around the school. Kiba, evacuate any civilians you can find discreetly. What about us? Issei asked, though he was already feeling the familiar stirring of the boosted gear. We do what we've trained for, Akeno replied, electricity beginning to dance around her fingers. We fight together. As another explosion rocked the building, Azazel moved toward the door. I'll try to reason with him first, buy you time to prepare. But if diplomacy fails, we'll be ready, Issei said, the red gauntlet manifesting fully on his arm. Azazel paused at the door, looking back at his daughter with obvious regret. Akeno, I know I can't undo the years I was absent, but I want you to know I'm proud of who you've become. Both of you, then he was gone, leaving them to face the approaching storm. Partner, DxD whispered in Issei's mind, this enemy is unlike any you have faced. Cockabil has millennia of combat experience and power that dwarfs anything in your previous encounters. Can we win? Issei asked silently. Individually, no, but together with your Lightning Queen accessing the full depth of your combined heritage. The dragon paused thoughtfully. Perhaps you have one advantage Cockabil cannot account for, which is, you fight not for conquest or ideology but for love. That is a power even ancient fallen angels underestimate. Looking at Akeno, who was already preparing for battle with grim determination, Issei felt that familiar warmth spread through his chest. Whatever happened next, they would face it as they had everything else together. Ready, partner? He asked, extending his gauntleted hand. Always, she replied, taking his hand and letting their power resonate. The light that erupted around them was brilliant gold, a fusion of dragon fire and holy lightning that made the very air sing with power. Outside, Cockabil's army was descending on their school, their home, their sanctuary. But they would find that some bonds were stronger than any ancient hatred, and some partnerships could stand against even the fury of fallen angels. The real battle was about to begin. The aftermath of Cockabil's defeat had left Q Academy in ruins. What the media would later report as a gas explosion during renovation work had actually been the site of one of the most significant supernatural battles in recent history. The old school building was gone, reduced to rubble by the combined forces unleashed during the final confrontation. But they had won. Against all odds, the partnership between Issei and Akeno had proven strong enough to stand against a 10-winged fallen angel. The memory of their final attack, a fusion of holy lightning and dragon fire that had torn through Cockabil's defenses like paper, still sent shivers through the supernatural community. 2 weeks later, Issei sat in the temporary club room they'd established in the main school building, absently flexing his left hand. The boosted gear had evolved during the battle with Cockabil, developing new abilities that even DxD seemed surprised by. Where once he could only enhance others, now he could create temporary fusion states where his and Akeno's powers became truly unified. "Still thinking about the battle?" Akeno asked, settling beside him on the small sofa they'd managed to salvage from their old headquarters. "Among other things," Issei replied, glancing at her. The past 2 weeks had been strange. They'd grown closer than ever during their recovery, but there was an undercurrent of tension neither of them seemed willing to address directly. The relationship between them had shifted fundamentally after Cockabil. Fighting alongside someone, literally sharing your life force with them in the heat of battle, created bonds that went far beyond normal friendship or even romance. They could sense each other's emotions now, feel the resonance of their connection even when they weren't actively using their powers. "The church representatives want to meet with you again tomorrow," Akeno said, changing the subject to safer ground. "Right," Issei sighed. "More questions about how a human can channel holy power without being blessed by God directly." The aftermath of their victory had brought unexpected complications. The Vatican was fascinated by Issei's unique abilities, while various devil families were trying to understand how he'd managed to enhance Akeno beyond normal supernatural limitations. Everyone wanted to study them, classify them, fit them into existing hierarchies. "They don't understand what we are," Akeno said quietly. "None of them do." "Do we?" Issei asked, voicing the question that had been haunting him for days. She was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the construction crews working to rebuild their destroyed club room. "I know what I feel when we're connected," she said finally. "When our powers merge and I can access both sides of my heritage without conflict, I feel complete." "Akeno, let me finish," she interrupted gently. "I've spent my entire life caught between worlds. Too human for the fallen angels, too fallen angel for the devils, never fully belonging anywhere. But with you," she turned to face him directly, her violet eyes intense with emotion. "With you, all those contradictions make sense. Human and supernatural, devil and fallen, angel, dragon and lightning, were proof that different natures can not only coexist but create something beautiful together." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither had been brave enough to voice until now. "I love you," Issei said suddenly, the words tumbling out before he could second-guess himself. "Not just as a partner, not just because of our power connection. I love you, Akeno Heimjima, for who you are. All of who you are." Her breath caught, electricity dancing unconsciously around her fingers in response to her emotional state. "Issei, I know it's complicated," he continued, his courage building as he spoke. "I know there are supernatural politics and faction loyalties and a dozen other reasons why this might be difficult, but I don't care about any of that." He reached out to take her hands, feeling the familiar tingle of their connection spark to life. "I care about you, about us, about what we've built together." Tears were gathering in Akeno's eyes, but she was smiling, the first completely unguarded expression he'd seen from her since before the battle. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I have since that first night in the park when you stood up to Rias for our partnership, when you proved that some bonds are stronger than hierarchy." The kiss that followed was electric, literally. Sparks of golden lightning danced around them as their emotions resonated through their supernatural connection, creating a light show that would have been impossible for any normal couple. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily, their powers still crackling in the air around them. "So what happens now?" Issei asked, resting his forehead against hers. "Now we figure out how to be together in a world that doesn't have a category for what we are," Akeno replied with a laugh that was part joy, part uncertainty. Their moment was interrupted by a polite knock on the door. Rias entered, followed by someone Issei didn't recognize, a young man with silver hair and golden eyes who radiated an aura of contained power. Sorry to interrupt, Ria said, though her expression suggested she'd sensed the emotional shift in the room, but we have a visitor who specifically requested to meet our Bridge Walker. Bridge Walker? Issei repeated, confused by the title. The silver-haired stranger stepped forward with a formal bow. Vali Lucifer, White Dragon Emperor. And yes, that's what they're calling you in the supernatural community, the Bridge Walker. The human who can connect different factions through partnership rather than conquest. Great, Issei muttered. Another title I didn't ask for. This one might be more important than you realize, Vali continued. Word of your unique abilities has reached the highest levels of all three factions. There are those who see you as either a valuable asset or a dangerous unknown. And which do you see me as? Akeno asked, electricity beginning to gather around her protectively. Fascinating, Vali replied with a grin that seemed genuinely interested rather than threatening. My sacred gear, Divine Dividing, is traditionally considered the rival to boosted gear. But your development path is so different from previous Red Dragon Emperors that the usual rivalry dynamics don't apply. The White Dragon speaks truth, D-Drake's voice rumbled from Issei's sacred gear. Your partnership-based evolution has created abilities I have never seen in any of my previous hosts. Which brings me to why I'm here, Vali said, his expression becoming more serious. There are stirrings among the various supernatural factions, old powers taking notice of new possibilities. Your success against Cockabil has proven that traditional power structures might not be as absolute as everyone thought. Is that good or bad? Issei asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Both, Ria's interjected. On one hand, you've gained respect and recognition that could protect you from most threats. On the other hand, you've also attracted attention from beings who prefer the status quo. There's going to be a gathering, Vali continued. Leaders from all the major factions meeting to discuss the implications of your unique development. They'll want to see your abilities firsthand. A demonstration? Akeno asked with obvious distaste. More like a formal introduction to the supernatural world's power structure, Ria's corrected. It's actually an honor. Most sacred gear wielders never receive direct attention from faction leaders. Most sacred gear wielders don't rewrite the rules of supernatural partnership, Vali pointed out with amusement. Issei looked at Akeno, seeing his own mixed feelings reflected in her expression. Recognition and respect were appealing, but they came with strings attached, expectations, obligations, political entanglements. What if we refuse? Issei asked. You could, Vali said honestly, but you'd be giving up the opportunity to establish yourselves as independent agents. Right now, you have a chance to define your own role in the supernatural world. If you refuse this invitation, others will define it for you. The weight of decision settled over the room. This wasn't just about them anymore. Their partnership had implications that reached far beyond personal relationships or even local supernatural politics. We need time to discuss this, Akeno said finally. Of course, Vali replied, moving toward the door. The gathering is scheduled for next week. Let me know your decision before then. After he left, the room fell into contemplative silence. This is bigger than we expected, Ria's observed. Much bigger, Issei agreed. When I first awakened my sacred gear, I thought the most complicated thing I'd have to deal with was fallen angels. Now we're apparently restructuring supernatural politics. Are you having second thoughts? Akeno asked quietly. Issei considered the question seriously. The past month had transformed his life in ways he couldn't have imagined. He'd gone from an ordinary high school student to someone who could stand toe-to-toe with ancient supernatural powers. The responsibility was overwhelming, but looking at Akeno, feeling the steady warmth of their connection, he found his answer. No, he said firmly. Whatever complications come with this, we'll face them together. That's what partnerships are for. Even if it means dealing with faction politics and supernatural bureaucracy. Even then, Issei replied with a grin. Besides, how hard can it be to convince a bunch of ancient supernatural beings that love and cooperation are more effective than traditional power structures? The expressions on everyone's faces told him it was going to be very hard indeed. But as Akeno's hand found his and their powers resonated in perfect harmony, Issei felt that familiar confidence building. They'd already proven that some bonds were stronger than hierarchy, that partnership could overcome seemingly impossible odds. The supernatural world was about to learn what happened when a bridge walker and his lightning queen decided to rewrite the rules. "Partner," DxD rumbled with obvious satisfaction, "I believe you are about to change everything. This should be most entertaining." Looking at Akeno, whose violet eyes sparkled with determination and love, Issei couldn't help but agree. Entertaining was definitely one word for it. The supernatural gathering was unlike anything Issei could have imagined. Representatives from every major faction had assembled in what appeared to be a neutral pocket dimension, a vast hall that seemed to blend architectural elements from heaven, hell, and places he couldn't even identify. Seraph Michael sat at one end of the massive table, his presence radiating divine authority that made the air itself feel sanctified. Across from him, Surzech Lucifer maintained the composed elegance expected of the Devil King, while Azazel lounged in his chair with deceptive casualness. Around the table sat dozens of other figures, ancient devils, high-ranking angels, fallen angel cadres, and representatives from various other supernatural organizations. And in the center of it all, feeling completely out of place despite everything they'd accomplished, sat Issei Hayao and Akeno Heimjima. "This is surreal," Issei murmured to Akeno, careful to keep his voice low enough that only she could hear. "At least we're here together," she replied, her hand finding his under the table. The contact immediately steadied both of them, their connection providing comfort in the intimidating environment. "The purpose of this gathering," Michael began, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in their very souls, "is to address an unprecedented development in supernatural evolution. The partnership between Mr. Hayao and Miss Heimjima has demonstrated capabilities that challenge our fundamental understanding of power dynamics. They've rewritten the rules," added a voice from the Devil contingent, Lord Baal, one of the most conservative members of Devil nobility. "A human enhancing supernatural abilities beyond normal limitations, accessing holy power without divine blessing, creating fusion states that shouldn't be possible according to established law. The question," Azazel interjected smoothly, "is whether this development represents an opportunity or a threat to the current balance." "I'd like to hear that answer from them directly," came a new voice. Everyone turned to look at a figure Issei hadn't noticed before, an elderly man in simple robes whose presence somehow seemed to dwarf even the faction leaders. After all, they're the ones who have actually accomplished the impossible. The attention of every supernatural power in the room focused on Issei and Akeno. The weight of their combined gaze was almost physically oppressive. "Stand up, you two," Azazel said gently. "Introduce yourselves properly." Issei and Akeno rose together, their hands still linked. Issei could feel the boosted gear stirring in response to his nervousness, while electricity flickered unconsciously around Akeno's free hand. "I'm Issei Hayao," he began, proud that his voice remained steady. "Current wielder of the boosted gear, Red Dragon Emperor, and, apparently, Bridge Walker. Akeno Heimjima," Akeno continued seamlessly. "Half-fallen angel, half-human, queen of the Gremory peerage, and..." She glanced at Issei with a small smile, "proud partner of the Bridge Walker." "Partnership," the elderly figure mused. "An interesting word choice. Not servant and master, not superior and subordinate, but partners, equals." "That's exactly what we are," Issei said, feeling more confident as he spoke about something he truly understood. "Our abilities work because we don't try to dominate each other. We enhance, support, and unify our strengths." "Even though your power levels are vastly different," Lord Baal challenged. "Miss Heimjima possesses centuries of magical training and supernatural heritage. You've been aware of the supernatural world for barely 2 months. Power isn't just about magical ability or heritage," Akeno replied firmly. "It's about will, determination, and the strength to protect what matters to you. Issei has more of those qualities than anyone I've ever known." "The half-angel speaks truth," DxD's voice rumbled through the hall, causing several representatives to shift uncomfortably. "This human possesses something rarer than raw power, the ability to inspire others to exceed their limitations. His sacred gear evolved not to make him stronger, but to make his partner complete." "Complete," Michael repeated thoughtfully. "Explain that, please." Issei and Akeno exchanged glances. This was the heart of their relationship, the thing they'd never tried to put into words before. "I've spent my entire life caught between different natures," Akeno said quietly. "Devil magic and fallen angel heritage, human emotions and supernatural instincts. They were always in conflict, forcing me to suppress parts of myself to function. But when we connect," Issei continued, "all those contradictions become strengths. Her fallen angel side doesn't conflict with her devil magic, it enhances it. My humanity doesn't limit my sacred gear, it gives it purpose." "You're describing a true symbiosis," the elderly figure observed with obvious fascination. "Two incomplete beings creating something whole together." "With respect," Surzech interjected diplomatically, "while this is personally touching, what are the broader implications? How does this partnership affect the supernatural world as a whole?" "It proves that the old barriers are breaking down," Azazel answered before either of them could respond. "For millennia, we've maintained strict separation between factions. Angels, devils, and fallen angels each staying in their own spheres of influence. But these two have created something that transcends those boundaries." "A bridge," Michael said with sudden understanding. "A living connection between different supernatural natures, which could be incredibly dangerous," Lord Bale warned. "If other humans learn to forge similar partnerships, if the boundaries between factions continue to erode, then maybe we'll finally have the peace we've been pretending to want for centuries," Azazel shot back, his casual demeanor slipping to reveal genuine passion. "These two have proven that cooperation is more effective than competition. They've also proven that humans are not as limited as we've assumed," added another voice, a woman Issei recognized as one of the Seraph. "This young man channels holy power not through divine blessing but through pure emotional connection. That suggests possibilities we've never considered." The debate that followed was intense, with representatives arguing the merits and dangers of the new paradigm Issei and Akeno represented. Through it all, the two of them remained standing, hands linked, drawing strength from their connection. Finally, the elderly figure called for silence with a simple gesture. "I believe," he said calmly, "that we are approaching this from the wrong perspective. We're trying to determine how Mr. Hyodu and Miss Heimjima fit into our existing power structures. Perhaps we should instead ask what new structures their partnership suggests." "New structures?" Surzech asked. "Consider this," the man continued. "They've demonstrated that supernatural abilities can be enhanced through emotional resonance rather than hierarchical dominance. They've shown that humans can access divine power through partnership rather than submission. They've proven that beings from different factions can unite their natures rather than compromising them." He looked directly at Issei and Akeno. "What if, instead of trying to classify you within existing organizations, we recognized you as the foundation of something entirely new? A neutral organization dedicated to fostering cooperation between all supernatural factions." The suggestion sent shockwaves through the assembled representatives. The idea of a truly neutral supernatural organization was revolutionary. "You're talking about fundamental changes to the entire supernatural world order," Lord Bale said, his voice tight with concern. "Yes," the elderly figure replied simply. "I am, and who would oversee such an organization?" Michael asked carefully. The man smiled, his gaze settling on Issei and Akeno with obvious approval. "I believe we're looking at them. Two individuals who have already proven that cooperation transcends conquest, that love is stronger than hierarchy, that unity creates power rather than limiting it." The hall fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't just being asked to demonstrate their abilities, they were being offered the chance to reshape the supernatural world itself. "That's..." Issei began, then stopped, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was being suggested. "Terrifying and incredible at the same time," Akeno finished for him. "The best opportunities usually are," Azazel said with a grin. "What do you say, ready to become ambassadors for a new age of supernatural cooperation?" Issei looked at Akeno, seeing his own mixture of excitement and terror reflected in her eyes. This was so much bigger than anything they'd imagined when they first started training together. But it was also exactly what they'd been building toward. A world where different natures could coexist and enhance each other rather than competing for dominance. "We'd need support," Issei said finally. "Resources, protection, allies from all factions." You'd have them, Michael assured him. The three major factions are prepared to jointly sponsor this new organization. And complete autonomy, Akeno added. We won't be effective if we're seen as puppets of any existing power structure. Agreed, Serzech nodded. You would operate as independent agents, answerable only to the Joint Council of Faction Leaders. What would we call this organization? Issei asked, the reality of their decision settling over him. The name should reflect its purpose, the elderly figure suggested. Something that embodies the bridge you've built between different worlds. Issei and Akeno looked at each other, and suddenly they both smiled with the same thought. Resonance, Akeno said simply. The Resonance Foundation, Issei expanded, an organization dedicated to finding harmony between different supernatural natures. Perfect, Azazel declared, clapping slowly. The birth of a new age, founded on the principle that our differences make us stronger when we work together. As the formal agreements were drafted and signed, Issei found himself reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. 6 months ago, he'd been an ordinary high school student whose biggest concerns were homework and his reputation as a pervert. Now he was co-founding an organization that could reshape the supernatural world. Any regrets? Akeno asked quietly as they watched the faction leaders formalize their support. About which part? Issei replied. The fallen angels trying to kill me, the raiding game against a phoenix, fighting ancient supernatural beings, or agreeing to become diplomats for forces beyond human comprehension. All of it. Issei considered the question seriously, then smiled at the woman who had become his partner in every sense of the word. Not one, he said firmly. Every challenge, every battle, every impossible situation, it all led to this, to us, to the chance to build something that proves love and cooperation are stronger than fear and domination. Even if it means our quiet life together just became infinitely more complicated. Especially then, Issei replied, pulling her closer as their powers resonated in perfect harmony. We've already proven that some complications are worth it. As the first meeting of the Resonance Foundation concluded, with representatives from every major supernatural faction pledging their support for this new paradigm, Issei and Akeno stood together facing an uncertain but incredibly promising future. They had started as a human boy and a conflicted half-angel. They had become something entirely new, proof that the barriers between different worlds were not insurmountable, that partnership could triumph over hierarchy, and that love really could change everything. Partner, DxD whispered in Issei's mind, you have accomplished something unprecedented. You have not conquered the supernatural world, you have convinced it to evolve. We convinced it, Issei corrected silently, squeezing Akeno's hand as they walked out of the Great Hall together. None of this would have been possible without her. Indeed, the Red Dragon Emperor and his Lightning Queen, founders of a new age, history will remember this day. Walking hand in hand into their transformed future, Issei and Akeno knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as they had everything else, together as partners, as proof that some bonds transcended every limitation the world could devise. The Bridge Walker and his Lightning Queen had built more than a relationship. They had built a bridge to tomorrow, and the supernatural world would never be the same. 1 year later, the new Resonance Foundation headquarters stood where the old Q Academy building had once been. An architectural marvel that somehow managed to blend elements from every major supernatural tradition into something harmonious and beautiful. Issei stood in his office, still strange to think he had an office, reviewing reports from their field agents. In just 1 year, they'd successfully mediated 17 interfaction conflicts, established 3 new neutral territories for cross-faction cooperation, and somehow managed to prevent 2 separate wars through strategic partnership building. Working late again? Akeno asked, entering with 2 cups of tea and the smile that never failed to make his heart race. Someone has to read all these reports about our revolutionary diplomatic successes, Issei replied with a grin, accepting the tea gratefully. Our successes, she corrected, settling into the chair beside his desk that had become as much hers as his. Through the window, they could see the training grounds where their first class of resonance agents was practicing. Humans and supernatural beings working together, learning to enhance each other's abilities rather than competing for dominance. Do you think we're actually changing things? Issei asked, a question that had been weighing on him lately. Look outside, Akeno replied simply. In the courtyard below, a young angel was sparring with a devil reincarnate, both of them supervised by a fallen angel instructor. A human sacred gear wielder was practicing combination techniques with a fox yokai. A vampire and a werewolf were engaged in what appeared to be a friendly philosophical debate. A year ago, that scene would have been impossible, Akeno continued. Now it's just Tuesday afternoon at the Resonance Foundation. Issei nodded, feeling that familiar warmth of satisfaction. They really were building something unprecedented, a place where different natures could coexist and enhance each other. Ready to go home? Akeno asked, standing and extending her hand. Always, Issei replied, taking her hand and feeling their connection spark to life as it always did. As they walked out together, past the agents and students and visitors who had come to represent the new age of supernatural cooperation, Issei reflected on how perfectly his life had turned out. He was still human. Akeno was still a half-fallen angel. They were still partners in every sense of the word, and together they had proven that some bonds really could change the world. The end. What a journey! Issei and Akeno went from a chance meeting to literally changing the supernatural world through partnership and love. Drop your favorite moment in the comments: the sacred gear awakening, that epic seraphim configuration, the Cockabil battle. Let me know. Subscribe for more epic fanfiction breakdowns, suggest your next scenarios, and peace out.